To each and every one of you, in Christ I am disciple. All praise be to the Most High God. The Most High God comes first. None shall be, that's what they say. Oh, I will rise from the praise of the dead. People are realizing quite a lot. They're realizing how evil this world is, how anti-human this world is. And we're going to go into it today. Today, in my country, I don't know for yours, is an extended holiday. Today is Monday, the 21st of April, 2025. And there's this extended holiday because Easter fell on a Sunday. So we have this consolatory holiday on a Monday. So I said Easter extension. Pope Francis died this morning. Hamas extends their deepest condolences and sincere sympathies to the Catholic Church worldwide and to all Christians on the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis, who passed away after a long journey dedicated to serving human and religious values. The late Pope Francis held notable positions in promoting interfaith dialogue, advocating for understanding and peace among nations, and rejecting hatred and racism. On multiple occasions, he expressed his opposition to aggression and wars around the world, and he was one of the prominent religious voices condemning war crimes and genocide. While I in no way endorse this Masonic institution known as Roman Catholicism and the Vatican, I must admit, politically speaking, Pope Francis took a position that he was against what was going on in Gaza by the Israeli IDF and by the government. He described it as a genocide, and he denounced it. He denounced the hostage taking by Hamas, and he denounced the brutality and terrorism that Israel was conducting in Gaza and in the West Bank. And I have to give him credit for doing so, regardless of the motives. In the last video I shared with you guys, we spoke about the fact that maybe I didn't speak about it, but there's a connection between the Vatican. Yes, I did. The Roman system and the Zionist Judaistic system, both being political entities. And I want to reiterate that both the heads of these two systems have a direct link to Satan. I was listening to Orlando Brown when he was talking about being used as a escort, and he was being molested by several prominent people in the hip hop industry under the supervision of P. Diddy. And he said something very serious and very sincerely when he said that his father had brought in people who had broke him in to the system. When he said that, they said, "Your father? Who was your father?" And he said, "Lucifer, of course." I want to tell you something. Kabbalah, the Knights Templar, the secret societies of Freemasonry that govern the Roman Catholic Church, and all the priests, cardinals, bishops, and popes, they all lead back to Satan. They're all Masonic structures. They're all what you guys call the Illuminati structures. Maybe in the inception of this Roman system, maybe there were sincere intentions by the several popes, because there wasn't one pope. Roman Catholicism began, at least the Roman variation of it, had many popes, and these popes met to form certain agreements. And it all siphoned down to one pope who represented the Most High God. He's the top of the pyramid. He represents the all-seeing eye. Remember, all these things are pyramids. They're all Ponzi schemes. They're all filled with lies. Having said that, Hamas expressed its deep sympathies towards the passing of Pope Francis, because Pope Francis was able to see the humanity in the situation and see that Palestine didn't deserve what was happening to it. I don't know if that cost him his life. He had health problems. But him as an individual, Pope Francis, he was in the right direction and he was on the right side of history. David Icke. David Icke is one of the good ones. I'm not saying that I doubt he kisses the devil's behind, but if he does, well, that's a travesty. But one thing I can say is that David Icke, he exposes a lot of stuff. And I'll come back to him in a minute. The guard changes, the agenda doesn't. Klaus Schwab, a very, very evil, wicked man who pretty much sucks the devil's tail, he has stepped down from his position as chairman and member of the board of trustees of the World Economic Forum. This is as evil a man as you'll get. Dressed in that Masonic black that judges use. It's a very evil, wicked man. you're watching there. In America, children cry for toys, iPads, for social media and other trivial things. In Gaza, children starve and cry for food. I feel Noctis Draven's pain. I feel the pain of this child crying for food.
Of the killing of innocent children. He fled to Egypt. He fled to Egypt. He was a Palestinian refugee. From my Christian colleagues and anyone who professes to follow Jesus, please do not talk to me about making room for Jesus in your heart if you cannot make room at this time in this space for the Palestinian who needs our help and our safety. It is incumbent upon us all to be present with those who are marginalized and oppressed. And in this moment, in this time, we need to be present with our siblings who are experiencing this oppression. As a Christian, I follow Jesus.
I shared with you a piece of scripture yesterday. The scripture said, true religion, pure for God, is this: to tend to the fatherless and to widows, and to keep oneself unspotted before the world. If you say you're a Christian, then how the hell can you ignore the least of these, my brethren? Jesus said it. He said, as you do unto the least esteem of these, my brethren, you do it unto me, which means the poor, the powerless, the helpless, the victimized, not the wealthy, not the strong, but the weak. True religion is seen in action, in caring for people who can do very little to help you, but need your help. You can't say you're a Christian, but yet instead of trying to empathize and help and alleviate the pain of people suffering, you label them terrorists, and then you brutally try to annihilate them off the face of the earth. That is not Christianity. It is written in the scripture, love your enemies, do good to them that do you evil for them, spitefully despise you and oppress. That's the Christian way. Doing that today. Are we loving our enemies? I put it in inverted commas. The Palestinians are seen as the enemy. Muslims are seen as the enemy. Islamophobia is at an all-time high. I spoke to you guys about anti-Semitism. Well, I'm using it very loosely here. When we talk about where there was a hate for the Jews, now today there's a hate for Islam and Muslims. Before that, there was a hate for Christians. The three Abrahamic religions. And I'm going to show you true anti-Semitism, but with a basis that makes sense. I'm going to talk about that on here. Shout out to Abir, who's been doing a great job on Twitter, enlightening people. 7 out of 11 examples of anti Semitism that came in the IHRA definition of anti Semitism are about criticizing Israel. Jewish scholars are defying the flawed IHRA definition. Kudos to them. What I'm about to do is show you something. But before I come back to this, I'm going to go to something that David Icke said. I should have it somewhere here. So I'm going to go do that first before I go into that. Here it is. Now, first, I'm just going to give you the pretext, and then I'm going to go into what David Icke was saying. 30 was never accused of or charged or convicted with crime, yet he virtually cannot leave his home country. Why do so very few care about this? Don't you understand what this means? This is a hidden social credit score in action. David Icke is banned from the entire EU because of what he thinks, and the governments and courts literally confirm this. How come the alternative media does not care or talk about it? Watch Christopher Neal's new film, Persona Non Grata, about David Icke's unbelievable ban and many lies told about him. All right. That's not why I'm not trying to do an ad for David Icke. I'm just going to go into what he says and what is true.
Nazi Germany, we must not just talk about freedom. We must live it, and live it by ceasing to cooperate with that which is.
Okay, I just want to say this. I think we all can agree on this. There's a time and place for compliance as a society. And what David Icke's about to say is something that he said a long, long time ago. I just never knew that. But I, through my own intuition, was able to come to this conclusion, the same conclusion he has now. You're either of the devil or you're not of the devil. If you are complicit and you're doing nothing, then you are endorsing evil. There is a saying that's Freemasonic, but nonetheless. It is an evil not when evil people do evil only, but when good men stand aside and do nothing. This is not a time to stand aside in the world and be quiet because you're trying to protect yourself and have your safety. I see a lot of people not speaking out. I see a lot of people not acting. They're coward. They're afraid of something. And David Icke is about to address this, and I'm going to send this information to people I know and love. I really couldn't care less how they react to it. It's my duty to prick their consciences and force them to commit to saying something on it, because a lot of people are not saying anything. Still too many of them. There are 4 billion people being active and doing something about this. And then there are people who are still staying silent, and silence is complicity. Let's go.
There are 3 types of people. 2 of the groups are responsible for every tyranny in history. And the 3rd group is responsible for ending every tyranny in history. Group number 1, those who mindlessly accept anything authority tells them without question. And they will just do whatever they're told and think whatever they're told to think. Then there is group number 2, Those that don't want to do what authority tells them, but they're terrified of not doing so because they fear the consequences. Those two groups together have been responsible for every tyranny in history. Fascism is not imposed by fascists. There's never enough of them. Fascism is imposed by the nation acquiescing to fascism. See Nazi Germany. So it says, well, what can we do? Well, you can get off your bloody arse, stiffen your backbone, and stop being a bloody wimp. There's a start. Look your children and grandchildren in the eye and tell them what you were doing when fascism was introduced. Oh, I was keeping my mouth shut. And then there's group number 3 that has ended every tyranny in history. The true renegades of this human family. Those that see they're being lied to, who see where this is going and refuse to cooperate. The people who understand the most powerful word in the English language. No, no, no. English language or any other language. No, no, no. Not doing it, not cooperating. So, what can we do? There is everything we can do. Stop giving your power to authority, and then you'll see authority.
British stole $55 trillion. That's trillion with a trillion dollars. $55 trillion from India during their colonial rule. But hey, they built some roads, so pretty good. They also killed millions of Indians with a man-made famine. But hey, they built a school. Good deal. They treated us like second-class citizens in our own country, but they taught us English. Nice stuff. You know, I know exactly where I would be if not for the colonization. But the real question is, where the fuck would you be without colonization? You would be eating potatoes and turnips for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Nobody would know the name of your stupid, insignificant country. The spiciest thing you guys would know would be your own sarcasm, which would be pretty useful when you have no food. Your cup of tea would be just a cup of boiled water. Your kings and queens would still be giving Christmas speeches, but they would be just talking about weather. It's raining again. You would be wallowing in your own filth and creating new diseases all the time. You would have no Michelin-starred restaurants. But hey, one thing is for sure, your British food would be exactly as famous as it is right now.
Oh God, that's funny. All right, let's go back to what we were talking. Okay, let's go back to what we're gonna catch up on. What I said I was going to do that first before I go to this. Hold on a second, let me get to it. Here it is. All right, so you have the power, you have the power to do, to make the change, okay? Because it's really up to you. If these people are not, they don't have the numbers, you see. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the skill set to carry out the things they want done. They need you to do these things for them. So you have to be complicit with them. And I don't care if you're fearful and that allows you to be complicit and allows them to do what they're doing, but you have to stand up to them. You have to make a statement. This is something where the masses have to speak. And you can see their media is trying to filter out the mass response by the masses and all the strikes and all the protests that are going on around the world. They're trying to tune you out of that so that they can have more control of you. Because if you only were aware of the reaction of many, 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 many people, millions and millions of people all around the world, how they're reacting to this proactively, you jump on the bandwagon. Because human beings, monkey see, monkey do. We like to imitate other human beings. We get more there are people who will instigate things, people who will start things, right? They're on the front lines. They take all the brunt of the damage and the hurt and the pain because they understand somebody needs to stand up and say something. Now, as that catches on like wildfire and people start to jump on and people start to build courage to turn against whatever is being said, that is when everything goes into full-fledged gear. But you have to understand there are people who are bandwagoners. So some people will jump on the bandwagon once everybody else is doing it. And then unfortunately, that's the way it is. They're not really sincere within themselves. They didn't do it out of conviction. They just did it because everybody else is doing it. And people are somewhat of a herd-like mentality. So these are some things for you to think about as to break down and pretty much destroy the legislation that's the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. So they've redefined anti-Semitism, as you know, in Congress. And I believe the ADL proposed this and so on, and they had draft legislation. So we're going to now go into what these Jewish scholars in the United States of America and around the world have said concerning this legislation. And I've always told you that there's something called good and then there's something called bad law. And when bad law, it's not equality. It's not about fairness. This law is passed as a political issue, and it doesn't really conform to laws that have the majority of the population. So let's get into this as we listen to these scholars, Jewish scholars, by the way, and they are literally Jewish people as well, as they go into their stance on this legislature and also on their defiance of it. In other words, civil disobedience for bad law. Bad law, you see, you guys don't know your power, so I'll repeat it again. As citizens or civilians in a country, if bad law is passed, that means you do not need to abide by it. Therefore, you respectfully conduct civil disobedience. And this is something in civics you need to know. You get into gear and you just totally do not acquiescence to that bad law. If there's bad law is usually very specific. Bad law, especially by the central government, is very specific. And bad law, remember, the individual states can reject bad law. That's the first thing. It doesn't matter how much bullying the federal government or other institutes or agencies do. Bad law is bad law. A bad implementation of good law is also bad law. So civil disobedience is a countermeasure to that. That is to say, the people refuse to obey the law. We had back in the civil rights movement, the young lady who decided she's not going to the back of the bus. She's going to sit down where everybody else is sitting down. She civilly disobeyed, and that took a whole turn of events, which led to the big civil rights movement. And here, Free Palestine is evolving into something even bigger than just the Palestinians and their freedom and the removal of their oppression and the right to go back to their lands, into something a lot bigger, because Palestine is a testing ground by these supremacists and devil worshippers to use in every single country. And actually the same measures they have been applying in Palestine are carried across by the United States police force and applied to minorities in the United States, and been going on for a very long time, from abductions to mass murders, etc. So it's very important to understand that the CIA and Mossad are one and the same. Even though there are people in the CIA who hate, and the intelligence community that hate Israeli spies, etc., they work together. Now, let's, and remember, there are also Israeli Americans, okay, people who were born in America or spent most of their lives in America. So there's all that going on. All right, let's get into this particular point, which is very important. Again, civil disobedience. Here we go.
On 17th of April, dozens of Jewish scholars, scholars of the Holocaust and genocide, scholars of anti-Semitism, Jewish history of Palestine and Israel, defied the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Watch their statements firsthand.
I'm here because I'm so outraged by the fact that claims for Jewish safety are used to assault the safety, freedom, and humanity of Palestinians and academic integrity and rigor.
To criticize Israel. On 17th of April, dozens of Jewish scholars, scholars of the Holocaust and genocide, scholars of anti-Semitism, Jewish history of Palestine and Israel, defied the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Watch their statements firsthand.
I'm here because I'm so outraged by the fact that claims for Jewish safety are used to assault the safety, freedom, and humanity of Palestinians and academic integrity and rigor.
The IHRA definition essentially says it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel, that it's anti-Semitic to call for Palestinian rights, which of course is not true. This definition gives 11 examples of supposed anti-Semitism, but 7 of these examples are actually criticism of Israeli policies. So they're not examples of actual anti-Semitism. So the IHRA definition really is a misdefinition of anti-Semitism, and it's intended to silence activism for Palestinian rights.
The article goes on to maintain that the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and the related legal measures adopted in several countries have been deployed mostly against left-wing and human rights groups, those supporting Palestinian rights and the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, sidelining the very real threat to Jews coming from right-wing white nationalist movements in Europe and the US, and I would add Christian nationalists today.
IHRA is anti-intellectual because it renders any evidence that points to the Israeli regime as Jewish supremacists and racist as anti-Semitic. This anti-intellectualism makes it impossible to teach and research about Palestine and Israel.
This law definition tells us, for instance, that if we describe the killing of nearly 17,500 Palestinian children in Israel's genocide in Gaza so far, 17,500 children, we are spreading an anti-Semitic blood libel, rather than talking about a thoroughly documented truth.
The IHRA definition argues that denying the Jewish people the right of self-determination by claiming that the existence of the State of Israel is a racist endeavor. However, UN Resolution 3379 determines that Zionism is a form of racism and racial discrimination, signed November 10, 1975.
According to IHRA, any reference to Israel as racist and racializing is considered anti-Semitic.
Yet this definition has been adopted by over 1,000 governments, corporations, and organizations worldwide. Again, what's really important here is that focusing on the IHRA definition, it distracts people from actual anti-Semitism by white Christian nationalists.
It renders any criticism of Israeli policies as a form of anti-Semitism, making a mockery out of the actual real threat of anti-Semitism, which is only enhanced by conflating Israel with Jews.
We must oppose anti-Semitism, absolutely. And we know what its forms are, especially when escalated by Christian nationalist groups who claim to be protecting the Jews, as they do in Project Esther.
I declare today that there is no way to honestly participate in my academic field if the IHRA definition becomes university policies or US law.
As a professor of the history of the Holocaust and genocide studies, I recognize in Israel the same racist inclination that IHRA denies. I will violate IHRA and I will teach it as a form of weaponization of anti-Semitism.
I grew up with 4 grandparents who had survived the Holocaust. I reject this shameful definition, this tool of state violence, this horrific distortion of Holocaust memory, And I'm here today to violate the IHRA definition and to insist on speaking the truth about Israel's genocide in Gaza. Thank you.
So, once again, why this is important is because when scholars tell you that this is not the definition of anti-Semitism, you gotta listen to them. You know what I mean? These are people who that they're not only are they Jewish, but they actually studied, in depth what anti-Semitism is, how it is, how it's taken into effect, etc. So, absolutely, this is bad law that's being passed. And this bad law that's being passed actually only is accelerating anti-Semitism throughout the world, because what's happening is that the image Israel is putting forth, and the people, the big Zionist Jewish people who are pushing this agenda, they are making it very, very, very hard on other Jewish people who do not support this agenda. They also do not want a mass genocide of the Palestinians. And as a result of that, we're looking at the world hating Israel, and I've heard, well, actually, let me play it for you so you can hear it for yourself. Here it is. Okay. So Adam, shout out to Adam, says, here's a Green Beret who saw more of Israel than most people. He saw them up close. He's an expert on Israel. Well, whatever. Listen to what he had to say about Israel. Know that any politician, business, or influencer supporting them should be canceled. Are you ready for this? Because this is going to be intense. And this is the reason why I said, if you lump everybody into the same boat, this is the dangerous thing. And this is literally what he's about to say. It makes a lot of sense, but it's also very anti-Semitic. Because I can tell you, I have Jewish heritage. And I'm not for this, what is going on. I know of a lot of Jews all over the world. I told you, majority. Okay, so there's a couple of points you need to understand. The majority of Jews in Israel do not support this genocide. However, by them being silent, they're being complicit. In Tel Aviv particularly, you see a lot of protest against what is happening. Now, 53%, if I'm not 53%, there was a poll done before October 7th. 53% of the Jews do not like what happened to the Palestinians. I think there was another poll afterwards. So for people to understand, I think it's like 55% of the Jews don't want Netanyahu, this was after October 7th, to be in power. So there's all that going on. Now, let me just make it abundantly clear to you guys. As things get more and more draconian, as the war continues to go on, or the whatever you call it, slaughter, it's very clear to me that the dissenting voices in Israel are increasing and increasing at a rapid rate. And I'll give you evidence for that in a minute. I think Mr. L.I.V.E, who's the leader of the opposition, is speaking about Jews killing Jews. So it's coming to that very soon in Israel. There's a lot of chaos going on there. But suffice it to say, what I'm about to show you is, to a great degree, anti-Semitic. I want you to be clear on this as we go into it. And this is very important for you to understand. And this is why it's so dangerous what the policies of the Israeli lobbies and Israel as their government is doing, because it literally is painting all Jews the same way, and it's not true. So here we go.
61, 62. Let me tell you one story before we get into the one I'm going to tell you about the child that was going to be buried in front of my eyes. Remember, I was in with the top people. My host was the ranking American military liaison from the United States. And he had been my roommate. We were both young lieutenants training troops at the, at the USATC. And we were, personal friends and so on. And he stayed in as a, professional soldier. And what I'm going to tell you is sickening, but it's absolutely true. A group of snipers in Gaza murdered a little innocent, little helpless 4-year-old child, a little baby, and sat there laughing like the Jews do. Like these people, I can't stress it enough. What they had done, they shot this kid, murdered him in cold blood. They're sitting there laughing, these two grinning sons of the devil. And the parents of the child you can imagine as a parent, do you have children? I do. Well, can you imagine how much you would do to protect your children, or even in this case, to retrieve the body of your child, at least? And they would lay in wait so that they could also murder the grieving parents. This isn't coming out of a bar. These were witnessed incidents, and they happen frequently there, but it gets much, much worse. Not satisfied with this horrific, monstrous conduct, demonic to the core, they sent in hungry dogs, you get the picture, to feed on the bodies of these human children. And they know that the parents were watching to lure the parents in who were crazy with anxiety and just sorrow and everything else, so that they could lure the parents in, and they shot and murdered the parents. Think about that for a moment, Mr. Listening person and Miss Listening person who has the slightest notion about good Jew, bad Jew. You better get it out of your mind, because I'm here to tell you there isn't any such thing. What about shooting the parents as they tried to rescue the dead body of their beloved little child? And these aren't stories out of bars, my friends. This is the real thing. And you have to realize this is what's in store for Christians here in this country too. So you better start realizing that what you ought to do is every time you see a Jew in the street, you ought to just kick his teeth in. One tries to move into your neighborhood, get all your neighbors together, tell them to get the hell out. You don't want that kind of trash in your neighborhood. I'm dead serious.
Well, there may at some point it may come to that, but we don't want to advocate outright violence and for obvious reasons. But we.
No, I'm not saying violence. I'm just saying, tell them you're not wanted here. You leave, and they'll get the message. Believe me. First of all, the Jews are the biggest cowards in the world. I can say that with authenticity. As you may remember from a previous conversation, one of my experiences was I trained combat troops during the Berlin crisis in 1961-62, just before the Cuban crisis and right toward the end of Vietnam. And I trained a lot of young men. When I say a lot for one man, I personally knew the names, faces, and so on of over 1,000 young warriors. Now, in the big picture, that's not a lot, but that's just me. And I'll guarantee you there wasn't one of the self-chosen among these people. And I found out later where they were. They were at home bedding down your wives, your sweethearts, your fiancés, and your sisters, because that's what they do best. They all got political connections, and they got the firm. This is when we used to have a draft, and people didn't mind because they felt they should serve their country. When you.
All right, pause. So I'm telling you right now, he's being very anti-Semitic, okay? And he's making up shit as well. He's talking about how the Jews slept with their wives and stuff like that. He's mixing truth with falsehood because the agenda behind him is that all Jews are bad. In other words, that is anti-Semitism, okay? He's not just trying to paint them in a bad light, or the policies of Israel, for example. He's literally saying every single Jew is a bad Jew. And I want to make it very clear to you that I totally don't agree with that. Okay, that's anti-Semitic. That right there, I'm identifying this is anti-Semitism he's pushing. Okay, now he's not saying something that's not true. Yes, the snipers snipe children. We've seen it on TV. So he's not saying something that we don't know. It's all in the open now. The thing is that he's now taking that and saying all Jews are like that. And it's just absolutely not true. That is false. Okay? When you start to lump a whole people into one category, something's wrong with that. and you're saying the world would be a better place if we just destroy these people, then you're doing exactly what Israel's doing. Israel's saying all the Palestinians are bad, all of them are terrorists. Well, if you say all Israelis are bad, all of them are terrorists, you lump innocent people along with that. Okay? And no, all Israelis are not terrorists. All Israelis are like any other peoples all over the world. Most of them are peace loving. Some of them have been brainwashed into, and then some of them are literally wicked people. Okay, we're not, the settlers, oh yeah. Okay. I'm not saying that they're not wicked people there. Obviously they are. But this is just generally speaking. The majority of Israelis are people who want peace and stability. That's why there was a big exodus of almost 1 million Israelis out of Israel. They left because they realized this place is not what I thought it was. And they got their ass out of there. Okay? Tel Aviv has been cocooned from the rest of Israel for a long time. And that's the place where, you kind of get more democratic kind of vibes and stuff. There's still inequalities in Israel. Apartheid is still there. And then when you look at it, those people are kind of cocooned off of what is really happening in Israel. You go to the outskirts, you realize how racist it is. It's the same thing with America. The cosmopolitan cities, generally, you don't see that rampant racism. It's there, systemic racism. But you go, deeper into, the country areas, and it gets pretty, it gets pretty obvious. Now it's gotten much more different over time, but still, this sentiment is still there. And so you have to understand that's the same thing going on in Israel. Now, America and Israel have a lot in common. America successfully genocided the American Indians, the original people who were in that country. And because of that, America thinks it can do the same with Israel. Because remember, this is a British mandate, right? The Balfour Declaration supposedly gave Israel gave this territory over to Israel, right? That's the Balfour Declaration. And this was back at the end of World War I. Okay? At the end of World War I. So this is definitely a colonial project. Okay? So, and anybody who knows what colonialism is, it's destructive. I live in a country that originally its name was Irie. This country's name is Irie. It's not La Trinidad. That's some bullshit that some fucking European came and gave it. Its real name is Irie. And the people who lived here, the tribes that lived here, there are tribes in different regions. Some of the tribes was the Aruka tribe, of which we have Hayarima, who was a great champion for the native peoples here. Okay? And he fought against the Spanish and eventually with some assistance from the Dutch, drove them out of this country. Okay? And you have to understand, people only talk about Geronimo, who was a great warrior as well and a great resistance fighter. It was kind of the last of them. He was considered a terrorist and an outlaw by the Rockefellers. See, the Rockefellers were the ones that wanted to get rid of them. So there's a lot you guys need to understand. So yes, in the United States and even in the Caribbean, in the New World, in Latin America, colonization came and affected a lot. But still preserved in these countries is the civilization that was there before. And even in the United States of America, there's some semblance of that civilization that was there before and the traditions and so on. And then if you go more south to Mexico, where, Mexico used to be, Texas and all these places used to be part of Mexico, which is why you have a lot of Latinos in Texas. You have a lot of Latinos in Mexico. You have to understand these so-called Latinos. Yes, the Spanish came in there and fucked up the people, and so they adopted Spanish names, but some of them are literally still Native Americans, meaning they have no trace of European blood in them. So we still have some people who still practice and speak their original languages and so on. You find them mostly in Mexico, but you can also find them in certain pockets and parts of America. These are the original peoples, man. And the Europeans came in and they fucked up everything, right? Latin America, but you can still find semblances of them. For instance, the interior in Latin America, in South America, the interior people, the people who live in the interior, they still protected the interior. So the Europeans were not able to advance into the interior because of guerrilla warfare, and they beat them back. So we have the interior of Guyana, the interior of Venezuela, the interior of Colombia, the interior of Brazil. Brazil has a huge interior, and there's a lot of people still living there, even though they cut down some of the trees and shit. You have the Incas, they from Peru. You have the interior people that still live there. So there's still the original peoples are still in little pockets in different countries. In my country, there's a reservation in a place called, again, Arima, after High Arima. There's a place reserved for native Trinidadians. Okay. And it's sad because we have to talk about reserves, just like our animal reserve. Here's an animal reserve. The Serengeti Desert is animal reserve. It's bullshit. But nonetheless, we can still see remnants of the early peoples, the peoples who were here before. Okay. And I say this to say this. The United States was very successful, not only at genociding of peoples, several tribes and several civilizations. It was also successful at human trafficking. Nobody talks about this. Now human trafficking is illegal. But back then, there was something called the slave trade, where human flesh was sold and bought. And nobody talks about this. One of the greatest crimes. North American wealth was built off the backs of African slaves. A travesty. And yet, to this fucking day, there has never been any reparations for that. A fucking crime was committed for 400 years. And there has not been a single motherfucking reparation for that. Think about what I'm saying. So when the American economy starts to fail and all Americans suffer, it's because of the curse put on you for not making amends for that crime, that 400-year crime. You got to pay up at some point. So not only did they genocide a peoples, but then they took another peoples, several peoples from Africa, and they oppressed them and made them like beasts of burden. And while they undid what is the word I'm looking for? They undid the fabric of the wrong, made it illegal to do that. They never paid, they never made recompense for their sins. The country was built off the blood of the backs of another people, immigrants. I would say even illegal immigrants, trafficked across the seas, human trafficking. Think about these atrocities. Not even Europe did this. Europe did not commit these atrocities. Anybody who was a slave in Europe, though bought, they treated their slaves with dignity, like people. Not the fucking Americans. No. They were barbaric towards another people. And they have never paid the people and recompensed them for the evil they did to them. So the evil comes back on you, and you will suffer as they suffered. So yes, the statements that this guy is making, where he says, you need to kick a Jew anytime you see them, you need to make them not welcome in your communities, that is highly anti-Semitic. We don't do that. In a society with laws, if you break the laws, then we are supposed to make sure you get prosecuted. Doesn't matter who you are, your economic status, your race, your creed. You break the law, and you should be prosecuted. And this equalizes the playing field. Now, the way how these societies are, some of the people who make the laws and who have to enforce the laws, and the people who have to sometimes adjudicate the laws, sometimes they go against the law, they violate it, and they make judgments outside the law. But because of their status, who they are, they get away with it. But you are not supposed to break the law. And one of the good things about Western society is they've made laws to try and equalize the playing field. Whether they abide by these laws or not is another story. And we can go into that some other time. But the laws that they make are fair. They're just. Let's continue.
When you notice that the predominance of Jews in filth, like homosexual organizations, organizations who murder little children, porn organizations, all the filth in the world, the communists, the Jews dominate. They may be 1.5% of the population, but they would have as much as 30 to 50% membership in these horrid organizations. But not in the
Okay, let me make it abundantly clear. He's absolutely correct about a lot of what he's saying. But he's painting the Jews as just negative people. And he should know that the internet was really created by Jews. A lot of the technology we have, not necessarily created by them, but facilitated by them. So there's mass produced, okay? So a lot of the things that he's saying as negative, there's a lot of positive that the Jews have done in the world. Again, Albert Einstein was a fucking Jew, for crying out loud, right? And he revived in the West the theory of relativity. It was always there, but the point is he revived it. So what I'm saying to you is you cannot, and I want to make this explicitly clear, there is something called anti-Semitism, and it's very dangerous. And especially now, the opportunity by anti-Semites, and I'm talking about people who are white, racist supremacists, they can now use an argument, because Israel gives them that argument, to go against all Jews. Okay? And I suspect this man here is a white, racist, supremacist nationalist. And he's trying to put fear in people's hearts instead of making them become proactive and stamping out the injustice that's happening. There's a difference between going after justice and trying to single out people and witch hunt, which is what he's doing. And I need you guys to understand the difference, because it's very important that you do not go on this gravy train. I don't care how true these people are, what statements they make. And I've seen it with Nick Fuentes. I've seen it with Stu Peters. They're attacking all Jews, and they're making it sound like all Jews are evil, and that is not true. That's just flatly not true. As I said before, the majority of Jews do not agree with what is happening. In fact, the majority of Jews, this is another interesting thing, especially today, a lot of so-called Zionist Jews are becoming anti-Zionist Jews, mainly because of what is happening in Israel, and the whole world is seeing it. They're questioning themselves, they're getting out of it, particularly the younger Jews. But there's been a tremendously large contingent of Jews worldwide who never were Zionists. They are always suppressed. The media never covers them. And even in Israel, there's a significant set of Orthodox Jews there. They call them ultra-Orthodox Jews. They live in Jerusalem. They are always harassed. They're molested. They're beaten. They're put in prison. Who are anti-Israel. They're not just anti-Zionists. They're anti-Israel. They want to see the destruction of the state of Israel. These Jews were there before Israel became an entity. These Jews were living peaceably with everybody in Palestine and in the Middle East. And they're descendants of these people, and they're a sore thumb to the Zionist Jews that emigrated there and then started the guerrilla warfare and started the terrorism against the Palestinian people, against the British empire that was there and the British establishment, as well as against these very same Jews who lived peaceably with other Jews. They instigated with the Palestinians of different ethnicities and different religions. Palestine was a place where Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived peacefully with each other. Isn't that crazy? In fact, some of the oldest Christian architecture is found in Palestine. The earliest Christian churches are in Palestine. Monotheistic Christianity is in Palestine. Okay? There's also monotheistic Christianity in Syria. Okay? I want you to get it clear. This Trinitarian concept, that is a Roman concept. That is not from early Christianity. Early Christianity was monotheistic, monotheistic, monotheistic. Period. Now you'll also find these early Christians in Africa. There's still semblances of them in different African countries. They're not as well known as the Coptics in Egypt, who have been all but wiped out. Okay. And the reason these people have been marginalized and they don't get them covered in the media, like they make it sound like Palestine is all Arab and it's all Muslim. That's bullshit. Okay. It's bullshit. Okay. Let me clarify this again. I'm going to make this statement again. Those of you who do not understand, listen carefully. There are Jews, let me say it again. There are Jews living in Gaza, living in the West Bank, living in East Jerusalem. Jews. They say they cleared out all the Jews from Gaza. That's not true. There are Jews who live in Gaza, Ashkenazi Jews. Now, they are Jews by genealogy. They are practicing either Islam or Christianity inside of Gaza. There are also Jews in the West Bank, and obviously there are openly Orthodox Jews in East Jerusalem and in Jerusalem, period. Okay? This is very important to understand. These Jews, why they are not in Israel, is because they do not support Israel, because they do not agree with what Israel is doing. And so they emigrated across to Palestine and they live amongst the Palestinians. They take up their religion and they live amongst them. They have children with them. Okay? This is not rocket science. We have Palestinians that live in Lebanon. And when we say Palestinians, that includes Jewish Palestinians. Because Jews lived amongst the people of Palestine for thousands of years. Even after the fall of the temple, there were still Jews living in Palestine. They just weren't a country anymore. There are different kinds of Jews. The earliest Christians were Jewish. They were Jews. So if you say you're a Christian, how the hell do you make sense of the fact that you're saying every Jew is evil? If every Jew is evil, and how the fuck did your religion come to be? Because according to your religion, it was Jews who first were called Christians. And then later on, the Gentiles, what Jews call Goyim, they also became Christians. So you cannot go around saying every single Jew is this, that, and this is where your fucking Christianity came from. Came from Jewish people who were Christians. It's like saying you hate black people. It's the same shit. Every black person is a coward. Every black person, and he's going to make an argument that the Jews are cowards. It takes a lot of fucking courage to stand up in the middle of the belly of the beast in Israel and protest the war that's there and saying, we're not going to war. I'm refuse the draft. Put me in prison if you want. Get beaten up in a Gestapo policed fucking state. But trying to take back your democracy, take back your freedom, take out the ideals you believe in. And one of the things is, I am not anti-human. I am not anti-human. It takes someone who worships a demon or himself is a demon-born human being to be anti-human. Because the devil, as I said before, he has no stakes in humanity in the terms of contributing to its existence. He's done nothing in the creation of humanity. So why would he even give a fuck about humanity? He doesn't care about humanity. David Icke, he calls this set of people walking around, he calls them reptilian. And we've heard this discussion a long, long time ago. I remember people talking about white devils and reptilian. Well, it's not only white devils. There are all kinds of devils out here. But I will suffice it to say that reptilian kind of matches. It's actually an insult to reptiles, but nonetheless, reptilian kind of matches the kind of cold-bloodedness of these devil-worshipping people. The synagogue of Satan. And don't get it twisted. It does exist. But it connects to everything. See, it connects to the Masonic orders and all this evil that you're seeing. There's a reason why the Western Europe and America stayed in power for so long. It's because it was ruled by evil, devil-worshipping people. It started off with sincere people, but was infiltrated really quickly. So let's keep it moving. So he's not saying everything he's saying is not wrong. You can't discount everything he's saying, but you must be able to sift through and realize when somebody's blanketly speaking about all of a given type of people, it's to annihilate them. It's to genocide them. And you got to be careful about that. Let's go. Keep it going.
Military, at least not then. There were no Jews. Like I say, they were home doing what Jews do best. So these yellow cowards who are good for nothing except shooting old men, hospitalized.
Okay, you notice his language. These yellow cowards. They're not white cowards now. They're not white, even though they come from Europe, right? They're not white cowards. They're yellow cowards. You have to be careful with that kind of language. When somebody is starting to label people like that, they're trying to fuel and fire up your hate towards a given set of people. And this is what the Jews feared the most. They feared that this evil that's happening and then a defense of this evil that's happening would lead to a backlash and people would just indiscriminately now seek to harm any Jew, anybody who is Jewish, anybody. It doesn't matter your intent. You could be in the front lines fighting for ceasefires. You could be in the front lines trying to expose the Israeli government, the ADL, the Israeli lobbies, the Zionists out there, which the majority of Zionists, by the way, are even Christian. They're Christian. That's fucked up, but what it is. So a whole bunch of evil, wicked people that fall under a Masonic order are pushing for the hatred towards Jews. They're trying to knock out two birds with one stone. They're trying to kill off all the brown people in Palestine. And on top of that, they're trying to finish the job they did on the Jews back in Nazi Germany. They're trying to wipe out all Jews. It's a very evil, it is literally, this is anti-Semitic. That is an anti-Semitic plan. And it's only because it's white supremacist, racist people. You're not targeting the greedy people who are profiting from this. You're not targeting the people who are filled with hate and want to see this genocide happen. No, you're targeting the innocent people who are trying to stop the genocide from happening. They're trying to expose that this is not them and this is not their religion. This is not what they're about. They're trying to expose these things so that people will know. And even the people who are Zionists, who thought, the state of Israel should be there and it's a homeland for Jews, they're changing their minds because the stuff that we're seeing is so repugnant. It's so fucking evil. You have to be an evil person to do. I wouldn't even go that far. You have to be evil because you're teaching yourself to detach yourself from humanity, detach yourself from life. And you would turn around and your very supposedly good friend that you talk with, you would kill them in an instant. That's the sort of mentality that the IDF is training certain of their soldiers to be. And it's just evil. Okay? So I say all of this to say, what this guy is doing is he's trying to stir up from the worst of the worst of the worst of these people who are being protected. You know, and America is complicit in this, what makes America evil. The people who are allowing this to happen in America and voting for it and so on, they're also complicit, and they're just as evil as the Jewish people who are doing that. Because you have people who are not Jewish, and they're just, not only for greed, but just for the evil in their heart to see other people die, they're going along with this as well. This is not just Jews. This is all of Eastern Europe. All of Western Europe, and the United States Congress. Most of them are going along with this. Okay, so it's not just Jews. Just letting you know.
People attacking hospitals, shooting people in the back. You remember when they got their clock cleaned, you know, a few years ago, and they attacked Lebanon, and they just got their clock cleaned, and they were just going back with their tail between their legs as they were fighting real men. The Jew is not a real man. He's a coward by nature. He's vicious.
Siegel and Schuster wrote the story of an immigrant coming to America. Are you saying Superman's not a real man? He's their creation. I can't go with what this guy is saying. There's certain things he's saying that are just purely anti-Semitic. And not just in terms of Jews, but just in terms of, it's racist, what he's saying. It's just blatantly racist. And I can't endorse that. And that is real anti-Semitism. This is what the scholars are. So I can't rock with that. I'm sorry. I can't rock with what he's saying. Keep it moving.
He's seclusive. He shoots from the shadows. I thought the Israeli Jews would somehow be different from American Jews. Less materialistic, more noble, more honest, you know, that kind of thing. Right. Not the salt of the earth or anything. I didn't go that far. But I thought I would see a little different kind of people.
Now, he's not wrong about American Jews, certain American Jews, mostly Zionist American Jews, being despicable people. I mean, we know what happens in the music industry, which is run by them. We know what happens in Hollywood, which is run a lot by a lot of people in key positions of these companies. CEOs of these companies are Jew, American Israeli Jews. Okay, there's no ifs, no ands, or buts. David Zaslav is an American Israeli Jew. He has dual citizenship. Okay, and you see what's happening with Warner Brothers. And I would not be surprised that Zack Snyder got the kind of hate that he got because these American Israeli Jews didn't like the messaging that he was sending. I wouldn't be surprised. They're trying to kill off his career. And this is why, and I say this, Zack knows. And Zack is, when he made the Stone Quarry, I remember him saying fearlessly presenting the truth, right? That was part of its messaging. And he said a lot of things about the industry through Sucker Punch, which is still one of the most hated movies out there because of the propaganda and gossip that was circulated. Zack was telling you what the industry does, right? He was talking about it. And then, of course, he's done Rebel Moon, which, totally goes in the face of everything that Israel is doing in real time to the Palestinians. Not to mention also George Lucas's Star Wars, so horribly bastardized. Again, because George Lucas was speaking about America and Viet Cong, the Vietnam War, and how the Vietnam fought back against America. through guerrilla warfare, they would call them terrorists today, as they do Hamas and Hezbollah, which are not terrorist organizations in any fucking way, shape, or form. I'm sorry, I just can't. I can't spout lies anymore. Hezbollah and Hamas are not terrorist organizations. They're less terrorist organizations than HTS, aka Al Qaeda, aka ISIS. They're way less than them. They're right now in Syria. These people are shooting people to death. Okay, they are beheading people there. They were beheading people in Iraq, and then a resistance group came up to fight against them. You remember when America and all these countries were fighting against ISIS in Iraq after Saddam Hussein fell? Right? So they're in Syria now. They are definitely evil people. But people say they represent Islam. They don't represent Islam. That's the problem. They don't represent Islam. In fact, most of them are not even Muslim. They're mercenaries. We have mercenaries in Gaza killing out the Palestinian people. The mercenaries are just killing people. Okay?
I found out is that they were even worse. They were even more evil, if that's possible, than the Jews here. And as you asked me, what prompted me, as a graduation of a series of experiences, because of the nature of the people that I was with, the intelligence community, and got to go places where no tourists at all could ever get to go. Proving grounds in the Negev Desert to watch the new Merkava 4K maneuvers, met with top leading Israeli leaders, military leaders, et cetera, inside Gaza and Hebron and all this other stuff. Right. And I started seeing things that, and remember, I'd already seen a lot of bad stuff. I didn't fall out of a tree yesterday. And I was just almost in disbelief at the capacity for evil and cruelty that these Israelis had. I mean, they were purely, when I first saw that thing in the Bible about you are of your father, the devil, I thought, well, Jesus said this, but maybe somehow he meant this as an analogy, something like that. No. Then I understood he meant it exactly as he said it. These people have a demonic heritage. I really, really believe that because I've seen, I worked with other military, the Soviets. I did undercover work in Central America. I was with Czechs, Bulgarians, terrorists from El Salvador, the Chinese, you name it. That's another whole story I won't take up your time with. But I had never seen anything with the abysmally evil cruelty, sadistic cruelty of the Jew.
So, again, I'm not saying that he's wrong about the extent of depravity that these Jewish people are doing. I'm just saying you can't paint a broad brush on all Jewish people because you had these bad experiences with this select group of Jewish people. And mind you, yes, unfiltered. And I remember I can talk about a personal incident, well, not a personal incident, but a secondhand incident that a certain couple had in the United States of America. A black man wanting to marry a Jewish man's daughter, and man, talk about the racism, and it's known, it's circulated around, California, Hollywood, that the Jews are extremely racist there, that run things. And this is not to say that all Jews are like that in California. Absolutely not. We have a lot of Jewish people who, I think of right now, Joaquin Phoenix. I can think of John Cusack. What's his name? Surprisingly, he hasn't been canceled yet. Mark Ruffalo. Mark has been he's been fighting this fight for a while. And they're all Jewish people I just mentioned there. And they're just not for this. They're not for this in any way, shape, or form. But having said that, and even though Bernie Sanders has tried to lead the charge against this stuff, Bernie, as of late, has not been responding to what's happening in Columbia University will not make any statements on that. He's not even trying to talk about it. And it's really sad because, again, Bernie pretended like he cared, but apparently he doesn't care about Palestinians. He's just mouthing the mouthing. The same thing for AOC, which is really sad. I thought she was leading the charge, to help to lead towards Palestinian freedom, but she's not really about that either. So it's sad. I mean, you had people who were really serious about it, and still are. Ilhan Omar, you have Cori Bush, you have Jamal Bowman, those are supposedly Democratic people, but it's strange that, certain things are not aired at all in the public domain. And I could go on and on about that, but let's just keep it moving.
Who has no compassion, no morals, no conscience, nothing, absolutely nothing. He can kill a 5-year-old child and go out and have a beer 5 minutes later with his friend and brag about it, and literally does. I witnessed this kind of thing. These people are monsters. They're absolute monsters. They have no qualms about shooting newsmen or reporters. Like I said, these people have, let me repeat it, and if I have to repeat it 10 times on your show, permit me. They have no morals, they have no ethics, they have no souls. They are not like you and I. And I spent enough time with them here and there. I'm not 40 years old. I've doubled that. I've been around the world. I've been here, I've been there, seen that, done that. I'm not easily fooled, and I don't make rash decisions or conclusive sad decisions about people. These creatures are true life monsters, but they're very good. They're very good at what they do. They hide everything. They all have this capacity for what I call a Janus complex. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And unless right, but if you're on the inside, like I said, like I was, you get to see them without their mascara. I think that's probably Mark Glenn's euphemism, which I coined if you didn't mind. And you see the Jews without their mascara. And do you remember that sci-fi horror movie, Them or They, or the guy who wears the
like Robin Roddy Piper and with the sunglasses that could be used to spot these aliens that had
nobody believed them, and all of a sudden they were among everybody, but you couldn't. But they looked kind of like everybody else. See, that's the way they live. They live, right? They live. And but with these special glasses, my special glasses were my an immunity from not being perceived as an outsider. So I saw them for what they really were. And I mean, the nastiness, the cruelty, you earlier made an apology to a lady for something about the language. And frankly, you should, if you were, of course, you shouldn't use language like that in your own volition. But if you're paraphrasing to make a point, you need to do that because people don't understand. They're naive, and they think, oh no, why maybe these people just said that they didn't believe Christ was the Messiah. So no, you're not getting the point. You didn't get the point. This drunk kid, I won't repeat it on your show for a sense of decorum, but just put in what worst words you can think of. And this drunk Israeli comes up to a Christian landowner who's been there with his people for 1,500 years, and he's threatening the guy. He's armed, and he said, "We crucified your blank like Jesus, and we'll crucify him again." You can take your blank like Jesus and blank. The most vile language that you can possibly imagine from this filthy, nasty, maggot-infested Jew.
I've had a podium for Israelis. I've had a dislike that I cannot describe in the civil rights company. It's grown worse. Every time I find out something else that confirms the horrendous things, the barbaric conduct of the Israeli people. And when I got there, they had a party. It was kind of interesting because there were intelligent people from all over, from Mossad people, from people from Aberdeen Proving Ground, people from Langley, Virginia, CIA, and so on and so forth. So it was quite an interesting party. People were very, very, looking kind of chit-chat at the beginning because so many of the things that they, knew and so on were classified, and, I want to make sure everybody knew everybody. But it made it a very interesting evening to get started with. And then the fun started. We went outside of Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is a very sanitized city. You have to understand, you don't see any of the horrors and misery that I'm going to tell you about. And you don't see the true nature of the Israeli people. That city is totally sanitized. Everybody out there can listen very carefully. Listen to this very carefully. You will not see this on the evening news. You will not see this if you go to Tel Aviv. If you go to other small cities that are out of the tourist range, you will see this full of graffiti. Things like saying, free Jonathan Power, our hero, Israeli hero, this and that and the other, Israeli patriot, free Jonathan Power. This is a man who betrayed our country, and he was a folk hero to the Israelis. They kill these children over here just on a routine basis. Nobody gets into the occupied territory and gets out of the line. What I saw there was only been seen by maybe 1 in a few million Americans. And the people here have no idea of the evil they're supporting. These are very treatment. These people are animals. They're absolute animals. They defecate on the Quran. They rape their women. They bulldoze their homes. They murder the people. These things are real. They're done every day. I've been there. And I'm telling you, if you've got a conscience, I'm just an American guy here that happens to have some experience. But if you've got a conscience, I don't care if you're a Christian or not, but especially if you're a Christian, you're souls of the devil if you buy into this garbage. What you're doing is you're assisting the devil. This stuff you're doing over there is unconscionably evil. I've been around some places, even with the terrorists, the FMLN, the FSLN in El Salvador, but I've never seen the brutality that you will see with the IGF. These people, you will never see the cruelty, the barbarism that they inflict on women and children there. You don't see it. They have the money, they have the power, they have the guns, they control the media, they control what you see all over. This is one of the most brutal people you will ever see on the face of the earth. And I'll make that statement in front of God, because he already knows how evil they are. And I plead with anybody saying this tonight, if you're a Christian and you're brought into this, don't buy into it. Whoever's telling you this is working for the devil. These things are lies. They are not true. I'll stake my life and my reputation on it, just out of pure patriotic reason. I have a conscience. I want to be proud of my country again. And I cannot be proud of this country like I was 40 years ago when I was a young Green Beret Air officer. I can't feel like that anymore, and I want to feel like that again. I'm a Republican. I'm a hard-line Republican, but I'm not a child murderer. I'm an honorable person. I'm a decent person. I'm pleading you folks, do something about it before we lose our country. I don't understand. We are paying for the misery and murder and torture and degradation and humiliation of hundreds of thousands of people who've never done any harm to us. Never done any harm to us. We have created an enemy. There was no enemy. We created the enemy. We are going to lose this country. We're going to end up on the ash heap of history. I don't care if I go to prison for being outspoken. I don't care anymore. It's my country. I love my country. I risk my life for my country. I have children and grandchildren, and I don't want to see them grow up in this kind of nation. It's insane. Absolutely insane.
So again, a lot of what he said there is true. I'm not against him on most of what he said. I'm just saying it's clearly not all Jewish people. And to debunk that, here we come.
I am horrified by the Israeli government's massacre of well over 65,000 Palestinians in Gaza. I am ashamed and infuriated that this mass murder is funded by our American tax dollars. I know that my call for a liberated Palestine comes from a desire for mutual safety of all people living in the region, and I know that my condemnation of Israel's bombardment of Gaza is not despite what I learned in Hebrew school, but because of it. Israel's actions are not in the name of Jewish safety, and it is the very conflation of Israel's actions with the Jewish people that continues to endanger Jews around the world.
And that's the point. They're literally endangering all Jews around the world by their actions. And whether you're a Zionist Jew or not, this definitely is going to lead to a rise in anti-Semitism towards Jewish people, you know. there's always the what's the word I'm looking for? There's always these slangs out there. You know, the greedy Jew. You know, the rat-like Jew, the animal-like Jew. These are all anti-Semitic things, but nonetheless, you know, you got to give people a chance. You can't start with a messed up slate on them. Unfortunately, because of these forced protections that are illegal, that the U.S. is trying to cover Israel with, it's leading to anti-Semitism. It's real anti-Semitic sentiment is now coming out because you're protecting a people who are protecting a nation which is led by a government that is committing atrocities on another nation of people, and that's just a no-no, you know. So I think everybody sees the hypocrisy of that, and it's becoming volatile. It's becoming violent. It's becoming evil, and that, of course, is the great plan to wipe out the Jewish people who are actually against this genocide, and pretty much also wipe out the Arab people, wipe out the Christians, wipe out everybody. You know, it's a very anti-human thing that's going on.